what we do. So this community Zoom was put on by the Men's Health League, and the Men's Health League is a volunteer peer-to-peer support group for Black men to spread key health messages to other men in the community through social, physical activities, as well as promote health and wellness services of the Nova Scotia Brotherhood healthcare team. Members of the Men's Health League, we serve as health role models in the community. We share information on key topics. We engage friends and family in wellness and healthy living, and we report back to emerging health issues. We act as a bridge between the community members and the Nova Scotia Brotherhood healthcare team. I will also introduce the Nova Scotia Black Women Alliance. They've been helping us and have joined us to promote education for Black women within Nova Scotia. I'll introduce Marsha Hudson Ash.
I'm going to introduce Wendy Portress. You'll be the one giving a description about our group. Go ahead, Wendy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'm with the Nova Scotia Black Women's Alliance. We are a newer group, and we're pretty small right now. It's Karen Hudson, Marsha Hudson Ash, Dr. Barb Hamilton Hinch, Denise Riley, and myself. And we are a platform that's interested in collaborating with other groups and individuals to deliver speaking engagements and conferences with a focus on Black women, health, and education. So we're interested in building a database of presenters and participants for conferences, summits, symposiums, etc. So if you're interested in being part of the group, either as a participant or a presenter, you could email us at NS, Nova Scotia Black Women's Alliance @gmail.com. I'll put the email address in the chat. And just a little bit of a the history behind the group is back last fall, myself, Marsha Hudson Ash, and Karen Hudson got together because we knew that there were opportunities needed for Black women and practitioners to educate each other and share information. And so we are currently working with the Nova Scotia Men's Health League to put together a needs assessment for an upcoming conference on Black health, both Black men's health and Black women's health. So if you're looking to collaborate, we are an alliance. So we're here to like amplify other groups and give folks a platform. So that's who we are. So I think, is Karen on to introduce our guest, our speaker for tonight?
Yes, she is.
I'm here, sorry. So it's my turn to introduce?
Yes.
Yes. So our speaker was born in Montreal to Trinidadian parents. She's a sociologist and associate professor in the Faculty of Health at Dalhousie University and the director of the Enrich and the flagship project, which she co-leads, of improving the health of people of African descent at Dalhousie Healthy Population Institute. She did her doctorate and postdoctoral research at the University of Toronto, where she focused on the impacts of discrimination on the mental health of Black women in Toronto. She's also teach and does community leadership and advocacy work in Nova Scotia, where she examines and addresses the health and mental health impacts of structural inequalities within healthcare, child welfare, and environment in Indigenous, Black, immigrant, and refugees communities. She's been the director of the Enrich program for over the last 8 years, and that looks at investigating the socioeconomic, political, and health effects of environmental racism in Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian communities. And some of you may know her because she put forth the basis of the creation of the Bill 31, which was an act to redress environmental racism. And in April 2015, the federal bill's National Strategy to Redress Environmental Racism, Bill C-230, in February 2020. So both bills are the first bills to be introduced on environmental racism in the legislature in Canada. She's also done a book called There's Something in the Water, Environmental Racism in Indigenous and Black Community, which was published in 2018 by Fernwood Publishing, and it received the 2020 Society for Socialist Studies Errol Sharp Book Prize and the 2019 Atlantic Book Award for scholarly writing. There's Something in the Water is also based on her book and was co-produced by herself and actress Ellen Page, Ian Daniel, and Julia Sanderson, and co-directed by Page and Daniel. And the film is currently now on Netflix. So if you haven't seen it, you can.
All right.
So at this time, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Ingrid Waldron.
Thank you very much. So during this time, what I would like to do is to present the outline, the framework, the methodology, and the findings for the study that I recently completed on Black women's mental health experiences. And then at the end, towards the end, actually get more ideas from you. So I see this as the beginning stage in terms of getting more suggestions from you on how this service should look like and who should be hired, and the kinds of services that should be provided, and the kinds of issues that they need to consider in terms of addressing any barriers that Black women would have accessing this service. So this project came to me from Mario Roll and Dr. Ron Milne last year in March, when they mentioned that they often get a lot of Black women at their service, discussing some of their mental health issues, but because the mandate for the Brotherhood is to address Black men's health issues, they didn't have the capacity. Of course, they don't have the capacity. It's not their mandate to address Black women's issues. So Mario just said to me, wouldn't it be great if there was a Brotherhood for women, for Black women? And I said, yeah. I said, this is something that actually really interests me. This is what my doctoral work was about and my postdoctoral work was about, and I would love to do it. I have some money lying around, and I'd like to use that money to pay honoraria to research assistants. I had the money to do that. So I started the project in June. So this is one of very few studies that has been completed on time. I can't believe it. It started in June of last year, and I submitted the report for this study June 1st. That rarely happens. Usually you need an extension. So I'm very happy about that. And I think it's because I was so passionate about the topic as well. So I'm going to go through some of the findings, and then we will probably leave the discussion till the end. So I am trying to forward this slide, and I can't. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it is about collecting qualitative data on the mental health issues affecting diverse Black women in the HRM, and the purpose is to inform a new health service for Black women similar to the Brotherhood, and it is called the Nova Scotia Sisterhood Initiative that we're hoping will get up and running sometime soon. So I had a few objectives in terms of what I was seeing in Nova Scotia and what I understood the priorities to be among Black women, being a Black woman myself, but also—
Sorry, Dr. Ingrid, we can't see you. We can't see you. We can't see your face.
Your camera's just up too high.
I think your camera's too high.
Can you see me now?
Bring your laptop. Yeah, just bring it down a bit.
A little more. A little more.
How about now?
We just seen the top of your head. Sorry.
Can you see me?
Well, give it a good pull down.
A little more. Sorry.
Try one more time.
How's that?
You got to take, the top of your lid of the laptop. You got to pull it down as if you're almost closing it.
Yeah, it's not a laptop though. It's a desktop. That's why it's a problem.
So your monitor needs to be tilted somehow. Or if you're still just the top of your head. Is it a camera that you have, or is a camera inside of your
It's a
monitor?
camera that's on top of the desktop. What about now?
There we go, perfect.
Nice, nice.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay. So I had a few objectives. I wanted to understand Black women's experiences with mental illness. And I wanted it to be intersectional. I wanted to get a group of Black women who had diversity around culture and gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, citizenship, disability, and age, because I wanted to know how those issues come into play in terms of how they experience mental illness, but also how they seek help for mental illness. I also wanted to learn about their beliefs about the causes of mental illness, because I think that we know as Black people that we have certain beliefs about mental illness that's very much steeped in African culture. And I knew that I was going to get that type of information from the women that I spoke with. So I wanted to get a sense of, you know, how do they think about mental illness? What do they think causes mental illness? What are the underlying causal factors for mental illness? I also wanted to understand their help-seeking behaviors. I think in general, some of us know that there's a hesitance in our community to seek help for a number of reasons, which I'll discuss later. But if they're not necessarily seeking help from formal services, how are they engaged in self-healing or self-care or coping in other ways? And I also then wanted to get their suggestions for how this service should look. So this service that we're proposing, who should be hired, what services should it be providing, and what are some of the social, economic, community, and personal factors this service needs to consider in order to develop services and other features of that health initiative that is really going to serve Black women, and that's going to actually speak to their priorities and their needs. So I have this quote here from a psychiatrist in the colonial era, and he says, this is during slavery, he said, "It appears that the Negro mind does not dwell upon unpleasant subjects. He is irresponsible, unthinking, easily aroused to happiness, and his unhappiness is transitory, disappearing as a child when other interests attract his attention. Depression is rarely encountered, even under circumstances where a white person would be overwhelmed." I put that there because that's kind of an ongoing myth about Black people, that we are less likely to suffer from mental and physical pain. This notion that we are simply tougher, the notion that we have been through so much hardship that when we continue to see hardship, we should be able to just deal with it. We are the brutes and the mules of the world. We don't suffer depression. We don't suffer anxiety. And we are in many ways seen as invulnerable. So that is a colonial kind of ideology, but it's an ideology that is pervasive today, and I think has everything to do with how Black women, for example, see themselves, how other people see Black women, how the community sees Black women, and Black women's help-seeking behavior. I think that's really key. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind in terms of those prevailing stereotypes about Black women's femininity, I guess, and how Black women seek help. I wanted to use a Black feminist analysis. This is very much a Black feminist analysis study. I wanted to center race as the most significant issue in the study, but I also wanted to look at how race intersects with gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, age, citizenship status, because these things will tell me, as they intersect, they will tell me a lot about the diversity of Black women's experiences with respect to how they understand mental illness, but also how they seek help for mental illness. So Black feminism holds that Black women's experiences must be understood as an outcome of their structural positions in relation to racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, class oppression, and other isms, and that Black women are positioned within structures of power in different ways than white women. Therefore, Black feminism emerged as a challenge to the gender essentialism of white feminist theory, which had failed to acknowledge intersectionality. Similarly, the anti-racist movement of the past was very much focused on Black men, once again leaving out Black women. So in many ways, Black women are situated in uncharted territory. You know, we're expected to support white women on gender issues, expected to support Black men on race issues, but nobody's really thinking about us. So we remain invisible in uncharted waters. So what's great about Black feminist analysis, it says, no, we need to be seen as Black women. We have a particular and very unique structural location at the intersection of those identities, and we need to be able to articulate our unique and specific experiences. The methodology, the sample is Black women who are diverse. I mentioned this already, and I started recruiting Black women, the participants in June, as I said, and I got my very last participant in March of this year. It was getting really difficult to find the final participants, and then I ran into somebody. I happened to go to church. There's a church down the road from me, which I have to admit that I don't go too often, but I happened to be in church, and you know, so I met a whole bunch of people, and I finally got a participant, and at the beginning of this year. So I have to say I was surprised at how well the study went in terms of recruitment. I thought there would be Black women who simply did not want to be part of this because this is very difficult to talk about. But recruitment went really well and really quickly. It was just at the end stages I needed 1 or 2 more people. What I did with everyone was audio recorded interviews, in-depth interviews, giving them an opportunity to tell me where they wanted me to be interviewed, you know, so any space that was convenient for them. Those interviews were transcribed. So I want to talk a little bit about the findings. And I have the findings here categorized in 4 main themes. The first one is beliefs. Beliefs about what causes mental illness. Because of course, if you want to understand how Black women seek help for mental illness, you have to understand their belief systems, right? They're directly correlated. And I wanted to understand their beliefs in terms of how it's informed by the culture. So the Black community, the African Nova Scotian community, and also how it's informed by the broader, let's say, white mainstream society, because we are all living in both societies, both communities. We're living in our own Black community that has its own ideas about mental illness, and we're living in the broader Canadian or Nova Scotian society, and we are influenced by all of it. And once I got a sense of that, I also wanted to know, what is your beliefs about help seeking and coping? And how are these beliefs shaped by your culture, your African Nova Scotian culture, your Black Caribbean culture, your Nigerian culture? What are they saying? What did you learn in your family while you was growing up about the best way, the ideal way, the culturally appropriate way to seek help? Third, I wanted to hear specifically about their experiences, the people that they'd gone to in the HRM, the counselors and the therapists. What happened? You know, what happened when they sought assistance? Was it negative? Was it positive? Did they learn something from it? Can the Sisterhood Initiative learn something from these women's experiences seeking help? And finally, as I said, of course, the most important part is getting their perspective. We want a service that is built in a way by Black women for Black women, right? So the recommendation section I did not include my recommendations. I included the recommendations from the women. And they gave me their perspectives on a number of things that they felt that the sisterhood needed to consider in creating the service. So here's a list. I put it in a box for the causal factors for mental illness. So some people obviously believe that there are genetic hereditary factors for mental illness, but what I found doing my study is that most people didn't believe this, right? In the Black community, yes, we feel that genetics, biology, a family history of mental illness does come into play, but less so than the other issues that are external and structural, often what we call the social determinants of health. So a lot of people talked about intergenerational trauma. That's a term that's being used often. And how did they understand intergenerational trauma? Well, it's the notion that trauma has been handed down over time. When we think of the Black community here in Nova Scotia, African Nova Scotian community, we think of intergenerational trauma, we're thinking of colonialism and slavery and ongoing systemic oppression, and how that has filtered into our systems, like our education system and our health system and labor and employment over time. So people talked about that, and they talked specifically about systemic racism, but also sexism, homophobia, the kind of microaggressions every day that they experience, and income insecurity. But they, you know, as I said, for all of these issues, they talked about it as trauma. So what I got from this study is that for many of them, trauma has more bearing on mental health issues than genetics. There was also a lot of talk about workplace harassment and racism, internalized racism, how we have, as Black people, often internalize racism from other people, but also from other Black people. Parental abandonment and relationship issues, and some people talked about unstable neighborhood environments. Living in environments or neighborhoods where there's a lot of drugs and substance dependence, and how that then impacted them. Witnessing of violence, even in childhood, that's still having an impact on people who are adults today, that the fact that they've witnessed certain instances of violence. IPV was a discussion by many individuals, intimate partner violence, the experience of violence and abuse, childhood molestation, emotional, mental, and psychological abuse. I would put in that category of sexual violence, you know, some people talked about trafficking, sex trafficking, and abuse at the hands of, pimp, for example. Others talked about loneliness and isolation, and independent of the pandemic, right? So this ongoing loneliness and isolation that they've experienced in terms of relationships. Some of the people who were biracial and bicultural talked about their identity struggles, living in Nova Scotia, but not really being Nova Scotian, but also being part white and part Black, or part Indigenous and part Black, and not knowing where they fit. And some talked about the death of a parent, and many talked about physical health issues. Of course, if we're looking at this holistically and we believe in the mind-body connection, then we know that physical health impacts your mental health, and mental health impacts your physical health. So there was a lot of discussion about that, as well as the challenges of having a physical disability. So some of the most common mental illnesses that people discussed included stress, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, PTSD, substance dependence, food addiction. Now I've included PTSD and ADHD and OCD there, although I make a distinction between mental illness and disability. So I see, and I know some people would disagree with me, but I see PTSD, ADHD, and OCD as mental disabilities, and I see the others as mental illnesses, right? So I make a distinction between cognitive disabilities and mental illness. But I included them here because they came into play in terms of how people experience their mental illness. So here's one participant. I just want to give you a quote. When she discussed intergenerational trauma, child sexual abuse, and workplace harassment, and how that has impacted her. She says, I was diagnosed with PTSD. I think a social phobia, social anxiety, and major depression several years ago. Several years ago as a result of childhood sexual abuse. And yeah, so over the years, I think I struggled with that. It bounces back and goes. So I would say connecting with service providers has been a huge issue. Connecting family understanding, but family of origin being the cause of those issues, if that makes sense. I think I question people's motives. So it causes me to struggle in relationships. It's the intergenerational trauma. I've dealt with harassment in the workplace, or just belittled, ridiculed, isolated in the workplace. Another participant described what I talked about earlier, the strong Black woman myth. I think every Black woman in the room knows what I'm talking about. Black women are tough, we can take it. So a belief that one should kind of just hand their burdens over to God has been internalized by women in her family, and has led to her unwillingness to kind of admit to her vulnerabilities when she's facing despair. So she says, we know our moms and other women in our family have been through some ugly stuff. We hear about that uncle that did such and such and such, but you've never seen them cry. You've always seen them cook and put on the family benefits and the church stuff. You always see, and especially in the Black churches, it's always women. But have you ever seen anybody cry outside of maybe when they were praying? So you see them praying, you see them praising God, and you see tears coming. but that's associated with praising God. Nobody ever says they're crying because when they get home, they just found out blah, blah, blah. You never find that out. So I've always been taught that Black women are supposed to just suck it up. That's what we do, because you know what? Whether it's a movie or whatever, it's suck it up, because nobody's going to do anything about this. So you can cry all you want and nothing's going to come about it. All of our little sayings, our little, churchy sayings, too blessed to be stressed, and all of that nonsense is basically the same thing. Is that, you know what? That means suck it up. So I want to get to my other findings, which is about cultural beliefs about mental illness and help seeking. So here's the chart. So many people said it's a taboo. It's a taboo. We must not talk about it. We don't talk about that stuff in the Black community, right? Shh, shush, don't say anything. We don't want to stigmatize the family. Many people also said that it was seen as a sign of weakness. You should be able to get over it. Black people don't deal with those types of things. We don't see counselors. That's for weak people. That's for those other people who are weak. We have a history of strength. See how much we've internalized it? When you look at this chart, we've internalized that. Others said, oh, it's just people who have lost their way. Georgie has lost his way. He's acting a bit strange is another, thing that people say. Another people mentioned spiritual sickness. While they said that, I don't believe it's caused by some evil spirit or the devil, as some people think. I do believe that there's some kind of spiritual sickness. I can't explain that to you, Ingrid. I don't know how to explain it, but something went wrong. Some talked about hereditary, genetic, and biological factors. Some would say that, I grew up in a household where my mother was always sleeping and in bed and depressed, and her mother was always in bed all day. So I do believe that my depression is perhaps genetic, but I don't think it's the whole picture. Others said living in despair, poverty, despair, instability, and having a loss of hope. Sometimes when you're in certain communities and you see that around you, it has an impact on you. Of course, many talked about systemic racism, internalized oppression, parental abandonment and broken families, abuse, all the things I talked about, and the lack of access to the social determinants of health, right? Income and supports and housing. And interestingly, one person said, it's evaluating one's success based on a white, straight male model. She said, you know what, Ingrid, too many Black people and Black women are trying to live up to a white, heterosexual male ideal. We want what the white man has. Why do we want what the white man has? If we think we can't get what the white man has, then we think we're a failure, right? So we need to stop trying to get what the white man has. And I think that's actually really key, because I think we see these models on television and the media about what we should have and the kinds of education we should have, only if we can get to this place. And that place is typically the place that the white man is at. And that constant striving is actually harmful to us. Others said that prayer, in terms of help seeking, is the only way to address mental illness. And then others said you should just be able to do it on your own. Why are you going to see a counselor, like a white counselor most likely? Why waste your time? Try to deal with it on your own. For example, one participant noted that mental illness is a taboo in the Black community in Nova Scotia. It's a taboo. You don't want to discuss it. You don't want to talk to anybody about it. I have plenty of friends that will talk to me, or I'll talk to them, but you can't go to, I'll say, the older family members. Do you know what I mean? It's not like the younger people. It's the older generation that you cannot talk to because they're just so set in their ways. Another participant who is of Nigerian culture says that prayer is the only way to address mental illness. But in the Nigerian community, or it's a belief in the Nigerian community, but it's not a belief that she shares. She says Nigerians culturally are very religious. So for them, they're like, I'm going to pray about it. And I respect that, but I'm not going to pray about it. So my solution is to take care of it like I would an injury. And that's why I say to people, if you hurt your foot, if you bumped it against the door and you sprained it, You wouldn't just let it sit there and fester. You'd go to the hospital immediately. So why would you let your head fester? I don't understand. It just doesn't make sense to me. Here are the findings for help seeking and coping. And I thought it was very interesting because the participants used a mix of things. They used the traditional counselor, psychiatrist, therapist, and the Western medicine and the GP, but they also used energy healing and meditation and mindfulness and acupuncture and exercise and solitude and music therapy and yoga. How do you say it? Reiki, biomeridian testing, support networks of friends, the church, spirituality, spiritual healers, you know, those faith healers who can, you know, use spirituality and prayer and the Bible in order to heal you. So those were the main kind of approaches, and people were kind of creating a self-healing approach that was just very catered to themselves, and they're going to use a little bit of that when they need to and a little bit of that when they need to, but always knowing that they had different things at hand that they could pull on at different times in order to make themselves feel better. One person at the top says, yeah, I'm just being serious with you. I'm just going to maximize my resources. You know, if there's a lot of things out there, I'm going to maximize it. I'm going to use multiple approaches to cope and address. I'm going to use alternative modalities, self-care. I'm going to do whatever I can in order to help myself. And when I said to her, so do you feel that it's been working? She said, yes, it has been working. I'm much better. But I'm somebody who's wise enough to know that there's a lot of stuff out there, and I'm going to maximize everything out there to make me feel good. So here's a participant who talked about spirituality, music, and sharing her struggles. Music, definitely. If I listen to some gospel or a choir, that does things to me. Hearing people's stories does things to me. So I commune that way and I restore that way. Church definitely has done that for me many times, but it's, you know, I'm not an avid churchgoer, but I do believe in a higher power. And there's a power in when people connect on that level of all wanting to be there and sharing that experience and being part of something bigger than themselves. Another participant says she believes that counseling is important, but she's had, you know, various challenges connecting with her counselors over the years. I know that it's important to share it and to talk about it and to discuss it with other people. So that's why I think I've been really trying to find that counseling piece that is going to work. I did really like the idea of a grief group and sharing as a group. I really like that idea, and I think that's why I kept trying to go back and make it work. But like I said, I couldn't connect with anybody there because everyone was white. They all lived in the country. I was trying to connect with these people and I wasn't able to find ways to connect with them. But I kept going back because I like the idea of being in a group with other people that have this shared experience of loss. So I want to now get to recommendations. You know, so once again, I ask people, you know, we have this proposed health service for Black women, and I want you to tell me everything you can about how we should be developing this service so it meets the needs of Black women. And I also want you to be honest with me about some of the realities of Black women's lives and what might actually deter them or create a barrier for them in terms of accessing a service like this. You know, whether it's economic challenges or financial challenges or travel challenges or childcare challenges. I just asked them to tell me everything that they can think about because we really needed to hear from Black women about how to make this service successful. So the first thing they said is, of course, you need to hire Black health and mental health professionals with diverse educational and professional backgrounds. And most of them said, I would prefer a Black woman. Some said, okay, maybe a Black man, but can a Black man really understand a Black woman? So we prefer a Black woman. And they wanted, you know, so I guess with the Brotherhood, you've got a manager, right? So they wanted to make sure that the manager for this service was a Black female manager who understood the importance of hiring a team of health professionals who are Black women and who are diverse in terms of their professional background. So she thought it started with, of course, the person who is going to oversee this initiative and supervise the mental health professionals and staff members. And that person had to have, you know, kind of cultural competency training, a real understanding of Black women's needs, but knowing how to hire the right people. And as I said earlier, they wanted to make sure that these Black mental health professionals represented a wide spectrum of educational and professional backgrounds. So, you know, nurses who have a background in mental health, social workers, counselors, alternative healers, the whole gamut. And in fact, many women said, we want wraparound services in a way. Because although my study focuses on mental illness, this health service is not for mental illness specifically, it's for health, right? So, but even in doing the study, I recognize, of course, the connections and interconnections between health and mental health. So it's kind of like this idea of a wraparound service. You have women who are going to, you know, address my social, my economic, my financial, my cultural needs. That's a service for Black women. If you don't have that in the mix, then you don't have a service for Black women. It has to understand the political standing of Black women, where we are situated in this province. And if somebody wants to talk about that, then the counselor has to be open to be able to talk about stuff that doesn't seem to be seemingly about health, but is about health, because the social, the political, and the economic is about health, right? Particularly for Black people. And then they wanted mental health professionals who have expertise in trauma-informed counseling. I talked earlier about the fact that most of the women talked about trauma. They talked about their illnesses using the concept of trauma. And then we have intergenerational trauma in the African Nova Scotian community. That's the backdrop of all of it. So you must have somebody who is able to tease that out instead of dismiss it. You know, as one participant told me, she went to a white counselor and she wanted to talk about race. And the counselor said to her, look, you know what? I don't want to talk about this race stuff. So yeah, you're talking about this race stuff and it's not something I want to talk about. So it might be better if you find somebody else, right? So even if it's a Black mental health professional, you need somebody who's equipped to talk about trauma. And there is that approach called trauma-informed counseling. The second recommendation is to make sure that it's community-driven and holistic, right? So community-driven meaning it's being created by Black women. It's grounded in the Black community. The ideas are coming from Black women, but it's also holistic in that it combines Western, alternative, self-care, self-healing approaches, because what the women in the study were telling me is that, yeah, I use a counselor, I use a psychiatrist, but I also do solar baths, and I do meditation and mindfulness, and I hum, and I do music. So what they're looking for is something that's community-driven, that's really grounded in Black women's realities, but that's combining Western and alternative methods, and that actually is also addressing their intersecting personal, social, economic, community, and physical health needs. Isn't that truly holistic, right? And everybody would say, yes, that's how it should be for all of us. But I think what makes it specific and unique for Black women is that we have challenges around the personal, the social, the economic, and the community based on colonialism, colonial violence, discrimination, and oppression. So it's going to look very, very different for us. It's much more challenging for us to live in this world. And that means that we need to be able to bring to bear all of those intersecting issues when we sit down with a counselor, or even in terms of how this service addresses our needs and the programs they provide and how they do yoga. Yoga might seem simple, but how do you unpack yoga in a way that speaks to Black women? This is about speaking to Black women. So it's important to also, when you think about the personal, the social, the economic, the community, and the structural, that you think about the barriers, right? We can't just pretend that this is going to be easy for Black women to come to this service. We have to be realistic. What are the barriers that they're going to have around, for example, the economic? Some women said, financially, if you guys expect us to pay, I'm not going to be able to pay. Or I have children. I'm not going to be able to come to this service because I have children. So this needs to be grounded in the realities, the structural barriers, personal barriers that Black women face. They also, so for people who are members of the LGBTQ community, they said that you need to really make sure that this is a safe space because, you know, in all communities, we face discrimination and oppression and various isms, but we also face that from our own community. So we need to make sure that if we are setting up this service, that it's very clear to everybody, to the staff, to the mental health professionals, but to the other women who attend this service, that this is a safe space for members of the LGBT community who are Black. And then the other thing at the end is the geographical areas, right? We've got what, 50 something Black community, African Nova Scotian communities across the province. I might be wrong, but we have at least 50. And we have to be kind of aware of the differences between those communities, their priorities, their needs based on where they're located. And also diverse cultural identities within all of those communities as well, right? So African Nova Scotians, but also newcomers and other Black Canadians, all these things need to be taken into account. So when I say holistic, I really mean holistic in terms of intersectional, you know, in terms of all the identities of Black women, but also, you know, all the lived realities of Black women, how do we pack that into this service as much as it's possible? So here are some examples people gave of holistic services. So it's a big list, and it was incredibly interesting for me to recognize that Black women that I spoke to was, you know, they were doing all of this. You know, counseling, they talk about a drop-in service where you can receive counseling support, peer support groups, crisis hotline. So, you know, if you can't come to the service, you know, why not have a hotline, a free hotline? Or they talked about a video chat, you know, a crisis hotline, but also a video chat if they're not able to come in. Health services where you can get a pap test. Right? So once again, very wraparound. Meditation, deep breathing, Reiki, yoga, mindfulness, emotional freedom technique. That's the thing where you tap your head, or if you know about it, when you tap your head, it's supposed to kind of relieve stress and different things. Acupuncture. Always make sure you have sharing circles with food. Healing circles, sound baths, essential oils workshops, dancing, music therapy, art therapy, book clubs, swimming, a room with a punching bag so you can release your anger, a mentorship program for young women, parenting programs, employment counseling, financial management workshops, childcare, or a space where children can play. Once again, speaking to the realities of Black women's lives. They also wanted it to be accessible. They said, you need to have this service directly in the Black community, and it must be in multiple Black communities, and it must be near a bus route. And you need to make sure that you're thinking about people who have childcare responsibilities or who are doing shift work when you locate it, wherever you decide to locate it. And that also relates to how or when you offer services. They said it should be flexible hours. Many of us work late or we're working several jobs. So if you end at 5, it's not going to be suitable for us. It's got to be available throughout the morning, the afternoon, and late evening. They also said that some women are struggling financially. Is this service able to provide bus fare to women who are dealing with financial insecurity to ensure that they have access to services, right? So we need to look at the socioeconomic issues that would actually be a challenge for women accessing the service. And they thought, of course, you know, and I'm sure this is the case with the Brotherhood, it's free. It should be a service that's offered at no cost or covered by insurance. And I already mentioned this, a free crisis hotline makes it very accessible, particularly if it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as I said before, voice video chat for clients who are unable to attend services in person because of work, childcare, and other responsibilities. And then offer a free childcare service. So that's what they're thinking about in terms of accessibility. Conducting community outreach. Well, they said, if you want buy-in, if you want true buy-in to this service, you got to find those Black women who are the movers and shakers in the community. And most of them said it's got to be the Black women in the church. The Black women in the church hold power. They know everybody. And if you can get on board, if they will get on board, if they plan to get on board with this initiative, then you're halfway there. right? So they said you need to start by developing relationships with Black female community leaders, relationships with Black women at Black churches, relationships with Black women through their children's school, through universities. They also said organize an open house or a barbecue with refreshments and talk about the service in a very informal atmosphere. So I'm thinking about what I'm saying here is that right at the beginning, before the service kind of starts up, you're doing the groundwork. They also said deliver presentations and workshops where Black women congregate, right? So the spaces and events that these Black key female leaders would be organizing, you got to get to know them first, and then you'd be invited to deliver presentations and workshops. When you speak about the service, you allow Black women to air their grievances or concerns about the service. You indicate and demonstrate that you're taking those grievances and complaints and concerns into account, and you're incorporating it into the final product. You're more likely to have buy-in, because it means that their voices have been heard. And then I wanted to know, how should we create awareness? This is more about promotion. So recommendation 4 was really about how do we build relationships in the community, and this and also to create awareness while we're doing it. But recommendation 5 is more about how do we promote this service. Well, many said organize a launch party, share promotional material about the sisterhood to different Black community organizations, other organizations, churches, etc. Ensure that the material used is reflective of our community, includes images of Black women of diverse age groups. Discuss it on radio, television, and print. So I did that this morning. I don't know if you heard, I was on Information Morning talking about this initiative. I talked to Portia Clark last year, so she knew about it then. But CBC Information Morning and shows like that reach a large audience, television and print interviews to get it out, create awareness about the initiative. Posted on bulletin boards, church bulletin boards, community organization bulletin boards, university bulletin boards. Share it with, as I said, Black community organizations, but also the libraries and government departments and agencies. Somebody said the library has an app. Well, of course it has an app. So how can we share it through the library app? And then hold information sessions and workshops directly in the community to share information, much more intimate. So that is, in a nutshell, what I found. And I wanted to engage you in a discussion, or I could actually take questions first, and then I just have some guiding questions. You might want to ignore it or not, but this is actually to get more information from you based on what you heard today. Maybe there's something that's missing that we need to consider. So I'd like to hear from you, and you can use these questions as a guiding point. But before that, does anyone have any questions?
So yeah, I do.
Okay.
This is Letty Beal speaking. I don't know where you've been, because maybe I've been hiding in a hole, because I've been, I feel like I've been drowning or treading water for years, trying to find something like this. This is overwhelming to hear that, because so much of what you've discussed and showed us today, I've experienced or heard, or just because I'm coming along not as someone who would be a professional who wants to share my expertise, other than my expertise is experience in dealing with a lot of what you talked about today. Mm-hmm. And I think I feel I'm more of a transplant here in African Nova Scotia. My mom and my father are both from here, born and raised, but they moved out years, like over 60 years ago. Mm-hmm. I moved here, almost 28 years. But I still don't feel like I'm a part of Black Nova Scotia.
Where did you come from?
Toronto, born and raised.
Okay.
Downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
my mom says to me all the time, and if I talk too much, you got to cut me off. I'm starved for conversation.
I think there's a moderator. Who's the moderator?
Well, Marcia
As
Miller,
long as you want.
right? But so I think my poor husband has suffered for 25 years because he's been basically my sole support in regards to because of all of the things that you numbered off about. I have my older one people or supports from the church, my older supports from back home, and say, well, you should have never moved to Nova Scotia because when you lived in Toronto, you weren't sick, so when are you coming back home? There's that. And then I've got, well, no, we don't talk about it. Well, that's just the devil in you. So all of that I've been suffering. And then there's the trauma of loss that, and then the systemic racism that I've dealt with, not only from Toronto, growing up in Regent Park, and I'm sure if you're from Toronto, you know Regent Park.
Yes, yes.
Working at 51 Division, for 5 years. So all of that, and I've got so much built up anger, anxiety, OCD, bipolar. That's all me. And then other physical ailments that, and my jewelry that I wear now. So much. And for me, I've been aching to talk to people and to share, because for me, I want to be that person that shares, because we need more people to share us. And I'm okay with that, but it just seemed like nobody wanted to hear me. And I'm talking about my people. Didn't seem to want to hear me. So I was starved for, that's what I feel. So maybe it's just because I'm frustrated for 25 years, and because I never came here like this. I came here like this. So now I'm like this.
Uh-huh. So I'm curious about what your help seeking has been like beyond seeking help, trying to seek help from people in the community.
Everything, exactly what you said. I've done it all, from acupuncture to yoga to and salt baths to, and believe in a lot of that. Spirituality is my ground though.
Mm-hmm.
Not just from my Baptist upbringing, because I truly believe in that, but I feel that I'm more spiritual than anything, so I'm grounded in that. But as we all do, we lose stuff. So
has it been effective? All the things
no,
that
not real, no, because I find myself grounded. One thing that keeps me grounded is my spirituality, but because I believe we all get out of balance somehow through whatever.
Yes.
So then you have to, to get yourself back to balance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I am, but there's still things that I'm missing.
So my question to you then is, when I talk about this service, you've done much of what these women have done. When you look at the service, does it look like something that actually would help you, that you would want to attend?
I think so, but I don't think we're getting around to each other enough. I guess that's my question. How do we reach each other? Because there's two very important Zoom meetings going on tonight
Uh-huh.
at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's a real shame.
Yes.
That they're both should be on tonight. Just like that. And then how do we your work is so important. I saw the video. That's how I got so excited about when I heard that, there's something in the wild. It's so important. And the work that you've done, but can you imagine how many people how many Black women you could have reached? But you said that you were having trouble finding people.
Well, no, I had an easy time finding. It was only like the last two. I was actually surprised at how quickly I found women, because it's Black women, because this is not a topic they want to talk about. So right at the beginning, I got a lot of women. It's just the last two. I was looking for the last two people, and that got a little tough. But it was surprisingly easy.
I just find that we're not everybody. We're not being reached.
Yeah. So
how do we reach each other? I mean, there's so many different things. You talked about food. You talked about, blitzing. You talked about, but we still don't seem to be. I've been to many conferences, women's health conferences, Black women's health conferences. I've been to a few, and the chairs should be filled, and they're not.
So Barb here. So I'm going to help to moderate. I was supposed to be on earlier to introduce you, Ingrid. So I'm glad that Karen introduced you. And thank you, Letty, for your questions and your comments, and even some of the questions that are being presented. And I hope my sisters are okay, because I know I was expected to sort of step in, but I was doing a graduation celebration before this, and it went a little longer. That I think some of the questions, and I do have the chat box open in front of me. So some of the questions that you presented, Letty, will go back to even the sisterhood and the brotherhood to talk about how can we help in this area. And Ingrid and I are both co-chairs of the Healthy Population Institute Health Outcomes of People of African Descent, which is just recently officially launched, that we'll be building more and more research around people of African descent and trying to create better health outcomes. So this is something that we'll take to both levels of how we can explore that more. So I appreciate that. So I'm gonna go to the chat. And you know how to get in touch with both Ingrid and myself, Letty, if you want to extend on some of the things you're saying. I don't want to cut off the great discussion, but I also want to.
I don't know how, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah, no, I'll let you know at the end. We'll share our email contacts with you at the end. So I'm going to go to the chat and also open it up to other questions. So in the chat box, Ingrid, one of the questions is, what about the experience of new immigrants' language and culture in relation to both Black and white communities in Nova Scotia?
In terms of what did I find?
I'll say yes in terms of what do you find, because you did mention that you interviewed some people who are biracial and some of their questions, but can you elaborate more, I guess, on the experience of new immigrants and language and culture related to both Black and white communities?
Yeah, so I interviewed people who were biracial and bicultural, and some of them said, I don't feel attached to any particular culture. I don't see myself as Black, and I don't see myself as white, and I never learned about my cultures, so I don't see myself as anything. Although they came to the study, which was asking for Black women, so they wanted to share something. But I didn't necessarily feel that was a struggle for them, and that was impacting them mentally. It's just that I never learned about my culture. I wasn't taught about it, so I don't consider myself Black. I don't consider myself white, and I don't see myself in terms of a culture. Because one of the first questions I asked was, I always wanted people to identify themselves. How do you see yourself? How do you see your culture? I would even say that to somebody who I probably knew was an African Nova Scotian. But one person said, oh, I don't call myself an African Nova Scotian. I call myself a Black Nova Scotian. And I said, not an African Nova Scotian. Then nope. She was very adamant about that. So I wanted to give space for people to say how they identify themselves. So some of those who were bicultural, biracial said, I don't see myself either way. In terms of the new immigrants, I didn't get a lot on the fact that, none of them talked about the fact that they're struggling as new immigrants. Most of them I think have been here for a while. So the immigrant identity wasn't that salient for them. For a few, yes, they did talk about the fact that this was interesting. So that they're not, like one parent is African Nova Scotian, one parent isn't. So they're not seen as African Nova Scotian by African Nova Scotian people. So they then left Nova Scotia. They perhaps went to another country. Then they came back hoping that they can just kind of fit right back in. And they weren't accepted. But it was those who had maybe one parent who was not an African, and they weren't half white or half Black, just Black people who said, I don't truly fit. And I'm not truly accepted. And I don't think I will ever be, because my last name doesn't signal African Nova Scotian to anybody. I had a few people like that, and some of them have lived in other cities. But the immigrant experience didn't come through that strongly. It didn't seem to be a kind of overriding issue in terms of impacting people's mental health. It was Blackness. It was Blackness more than anything.
And someone has suggested that might be a good study. So we'll add that to the list of many studies that people would probably like us to explore, or people would like to explore. So we'll add that to our list. So I didn't introduce myself as I jumped right in. I'm sorry. So I'm part of the sisterhood, and I'm Barb Hamilton Hinch, and I teach at Dalhousie in the School of Health and Human Performance. And so really happy to be here tonight with everyone. And thank you, Ingrid, for coming online and discussing this very important and relevant topic. Another question that we have is, how many participants did you have, and what was the age range?
So I set out to recruit 25. It wasn't huge, but that was based on the budget. And also it was qualitative. So this wasn't supposed to be generalizable. It was supposed to be kind of in-depth, right? Getting a sense of people's experiences. So I got 25 women, and I got women between the ages of early 20s to, I would say, early 60s. And women who were African American from the United States, born in Nova Scotia, but didn't really consider themselves African Nova Scotian, from Nigeria, from other African countries, from other parts of Canada, and women with diverse disabilities as well, ADHD, OCD, etc.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up to see if there's another question on the floor that's not in the chat. Anybody else have comments or questions? All are welcome.
I got a question. What is the expected time frame you want to have this program up and running?
That's a difficult question because I think back to the Nova Scotia Brotherhood. And I remember being part of consultations with the Brotherhood, I think it was back in 2013 or 2012. And it only got up and running, what, maybe 2 or 3 years later. So we don't know at this stage. I do know that before the pandemic hit, late February, I met with Gary O'Toole, who's a top person, who is the person who's going to make a decision about this, and about 4 other people at Nova Scotia Health Authority, Sharon Davis Murdoch, Mario Roll, and Dr. Milne. And I did a little bit of a presentation. I had some preliminary findings, and I kind of walked in there thinking perhaps nothing was going to happen, but I actually came out thinking that they were extremely interested. Even during the meeting, you know, Sharon kind of said, you know, can this happen? Is this going to happen? And they said, well, what we want to do is we want to expand the Brotherhood to other parts of Nova Scotia. But yes, we're very interested in this sisterhood. And I was told just to send them a few articles on Black women's mental health, which I did immediately. But the thing is, I was going to do it on my own, of course, for this report, but he wanted to get some literature. And just what my sense was is that, yes, they want to do this. When it's going to happen, I don't know, right? Nova Scotia Health Authority takes a long time to do a lot of things. It's certainly not going to happen this year. I think Mario can provide a better guideline based on what happened with the Brotherhood. But these things take some time.
All right, thank you.
I will say that I submitted the final report the same time I submitted it to the participants, which was Sunday, June the 1st. So I need to give them time to read it. It hasn't been a month as yet. So they got it June 1st, and they're supposed to get back to me about the report, the status of it, and then the status of the initiative.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. One of the comments from one of our participants, Warren, is that he just recently completed a domestic violence prevention project, and one of the good things that came out of that is that the men are talking about how can they be better advocates and support people for Black women. So it's great that men are beginning to ask that question: how can they be better advocates and support people and Black women? And I don't know if within your research, Ingrid, if the Black women talked at all about support from Black men or men in general that have helped them deal with some of their challenges. Did any talk about the role of men in coping? They
didn't, but I did another study on intimate partner violence with another professor at Dalhousie last year. That project is complete. And I think the general sense is that just like a lot of things, there's a silence about intimate partner violence in the Black community. Part of that has to do with not wanting to get your partner in trouble, right? So we know how Black men are seen by the police. So there's a code of silence in all Black communities, which silences Black women in pain and Black women who experience IPV because they would prefer to protect their Black husbands, partners than themselves, because they know that there's a history of stigma and racism from police. So they tend to protect the men, and the men actually support that protection, right? So, you know, it's about how Black women don't value themselves. That's what it has to, that's what it's about. So what came out of that research is that, you know, we need to first of all, break the code of silence, but also Black people need to know what IPV actually is. Because some people don't recognize that a partner that constantly puts you down every day, that's IPV. You know, there are different forms of IPV. There's financial abuse, there's psychological abuse, emotional abuse, and a lot, not just Black women, a lot of women would say, oh, was I being abused?
Mm-hmm.
But for Black women, I think because it's something, we're such in denial. And once again, it goes back to the strong Black woman myth. We can take it, we can take it. I'm going to take it, but I certainly don't want my husband to get in trouble by the police because I know what that does to our community. So I'm going to let him get away with it before I protect myself. That's an overriding theme for women as nurturers, but mostly for Black women. So that's problematic. So we have to break the code of silence. And part of that is also learning and educating yourself about IPV, educating men, Black men, about what IPV is, but also starting to set up services that specifically for Black women in the community and getting Black mental health and health counselors together to do that work in the community.
Yeah. Thank you, Ingrid. Another question is raised, and perhaps it can go back to the sisterhood to discuss it and tease it out a little bit more, Adina, and I appreciate your question, is how does one stay engaged, learn more about the sisterhood and involvement? And I don't know if Karen or Marsha or Wendy Lee wants to take that on, because right now it's still at its infancy stage, so we don't have a lot of foundation right now to exchange or share. It's just very much so getting its legs underneath itself. But if you want to share your information with us, and Adina, you have my contact information, then we will be looking at other ways to include and support women as we figure out what our next steps are. But I'll turn it over to Marsha, Karen, or Wendy Lee if they want to add anything to that.
Go ahead, Karen.
Karen, Marsha called you out to see if you wanted to add anything to Adina's question about how does one get engaged, learn more about the sisterhood and involvement. And your mic is muted.
I can speak to that.
Thanks, Wendy Lee.
Yeah, so right now the Nova Scotia Black Women's Alliance is looking to give women.
Can you hear me, Barb?
Wendy Lee's talking right now, Karen, so we'll let her finish and we'll come back to you. Go ahead, Wendy Lee.
Women access to platforms similar to this, like speaking engagements. Are originally, when we got together, we were planning a in-person conference before COVID hit. And so we were planning something for the long weekend in May and a needs assessment around education and Black women's health. And so we didn't get to do that, but we're going to try to do that in a COVID-friendly platform. And then we're going to collaborate with the Nova Scotia Men's Health League. And when we collaborate, we're going to work separately but together in the same space in a conference that will hopefully somehow unfold in the fall of 2020.
Can I just make a little clarification? So when we talk about the sisterhood is going to be almost like the clinical aspect of it. So the sisterhood is still in the making. However, the Black Alliance, the Women's Alliance, is the group almost like the Men's Health League. I just wanted to make that
And we're more involved in the social determinants of health, side of health, and holistically bringing women together. And one of the biggest social determinants of health, in my opinion, is education and employment. And so if we can gain access to employment and education, all of those other health determinants that are connected to that are directly influenced by education and employment, we can move forward in healing ourselves. So we want to provide a platform. So if you're interested in participating with the Nova Scotia Black Women's Alliance, then you can send us an email at nsblackwomensalliance@gmail.com, and you can participate in two ways. You can be a presenter like Dr. Ingrid is tonight, or you could be someone who's interested in us inviting you to engagements like this when we have them.
Thanks, Wendy Lee. And thank you, Mario, for that clarification. So we do hope to eventually build into the sisterhood project similar to the clinical practice that we have with Dr. Ron and Nova Scotia Brotherhood. a question. We can learn from the Moose. Let me just see. We can learn from the Moose Hive campaign their Indigenous partners are engaging in. So I guess that's a suggestion of looking to the Moose Hive campaign that is happening right now within the Indigenous partners. So I guess that's something that we can take into consideration as we move forward with this process. A great compliment in terms of nice work, nice to hear the study, and someone saying a lot of respect to Letty and sharing the experience, and being heard fully is so important, and appear this is critical to your study. So they want to acknowledge that and extend sincere thanks and support within there. Again, some great thanks. And would like to stay in touch with works within the Mental Health Foundation, would like to stay in touch around that. That's Jill Chapel. And Adina put in the chat, thank you Adina, the email for NS Black Women's Alliance for those who want to send emails. And so the email's in there for people to reach out and connect. So now I'll open it back up to see if there's any questions on the floor.
Yeah, I have a question.
Thanks, Ron.
We do have a couple of representatives from Nova Scotia Health Authority, so I'd just like to get their impressions about the study and maybe about the need for sisterhood, and maybe how we can carry that forward, or what that would look like.
Great question, Ron. So I'll throw it out. You all know who you are. So I'll throw it out to whoever wants to take that baton.
Hi, my name's Lindsay Sutherland, and I'm I've just been new to the role about 4 or 5 weeks as a Director for Primary Health Care in Central Zone. So I'm just getting connected and educating myself about this work. I actually I used to be at the Department of Health and Wellness, and I actually worked with Sharon Davis Murdoch and actually helped write the first proposal for Nova Scotia Brotherhood. So I had been connected to that work way back then. So it certainly can take time to address. And certainly one of the things that we often have a barrier around trying to get funding and support for this is having good research. So thank you so much, Ingrid, for contributing to the body of research and reaching out and sharing this information. It's an excellent resource to help move forward. And I certainly see a lot of partners, obviously, that we could be reaching out with and connecting with on figuring out what this needs to look like, and how we could put something forward for consideration. Just the other thing, just because, you know, the Health Authority is the administrator of funds, but we also have to ask for funds to run our programs for the Department of Health and Wellness. So that would take some time to build that proposal and figure out what that needs to look like. I think we have an excellent basis to work from based on the work of the Brotherhood, but we need to make sure it fits and is the right context for the needs for the sisterhood. So we certainly would be looking forward to working on that. So thank you. Thank you for contributing, and everybody on the call.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to respond or comment?
I'm the other one who's with NSHA. Hi, I'm Loretta. I, again, have been here about 3 months, just got in before COVID hit, so I haven't met many people at all, unfortunately, face to face. I work closely with Lindsay and Mario and Dwayne and Dr. Ron, and I think this is fabulous. It's just now, how do we push it forward? And this is where, unfortunately, it does take time. It takes funds, and I think for me that funding is a big key to this. But if there are a lot of groups, and we have the history within SBI, maybe this, you know, we've already started something, and I think will hopefully make it a little easier, make it the line a little straighter between different groups to connect. So I guess now it's just, you know, action.
Do you see it as a possibility that it will happen? Do you think it will? It can?
You know, Ingrid, I'd love to be able to answer that question with full-on enthusiasm. I have been with NSHA for about 3 months, so I'm really not the best person to answer that. I would like to say yes, but I think really I'm coming at it with a lens that's very small right now. So maybe I'll give that over to Lindsay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think anything's possible. I just think time, I don't know that we can put a time on it, but I think I guess it sounds cliche, a matter of time. I don't know. But I do think in this environment and climate, I think we have a lot of great work that we can build on and move forward with. So, yeah.
And I think just adding to it, and I think the time is right. And I don't know if we want to wait a long time. And I say that listening to what Letty said and some of the work that I'm doing and other researchers, that Black women are in pain and have been for some time. So even though it takes time, I don't know how much time some of us who are on this call have in terms of the pain that we're feeling. So I think it would be very important at the end of this call, and even within the sisterhood that we have, is to try and get some warm bodies, to start looking at how can we move it forward so time doesn't take so long. The same way when people are talking about Black Lives Matter and we stand in solidarity, and what I have said when I have other colleagues who are not Black who say that to me, is that your actions speak louder than your words. So if I see you action and not just standing with me in solidarity, but putting action behind those words, then I believe you stand with me in solidarity. So I throw it as a challenge to say that we recognize that Black lives matter, that Black women are dying because of the fact that their needs are not being met. And we need to find a way to accelerate that time so that we can build a solid foundation. And one model that I take with me from the Gambia around education is that if you educate a woman, you educate a nation. And building on that, if you make sure the health of a woman is positive and successful, then the health of a family becomes that much healthier. And so we really do need to look at it as a crisis and start moving towards it as a crisis, as opposed to it's going to take time. And I'm not saying that you need to answer that right now. And I appreciate the fact that both of you have expressed how new you are, but you have a number of folks on this call who are saying, what do you need us to do to push this? And that, I think that's where we need to start from. And I'm not looking for a response. I'm just saying you have commitment from the people who are on this call or they wouldn't be here on this call to say we need action. So I
feel that. I feel it and I know it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tracy Dorrington Skinner from Creating Communities of Care.
Yes, thank you, Tracy.
Creating Communities of Care is a really new initiative, and we are looking specifically at African Nova Scotian women and how they are impacted by domestic violence and sexualized violence, partnered violence, and gendered violence, all of those things. And we are just in the grassroots stage of building this program. So I think this is a good fit to really, I mean, it's one thing to have a group of people working on creating communities of care, but to have other Black women in your community with the same objectives, with that same vision, I think is going to make that happen a lot easier. Yes. So I'm fully committed.
Thank you, Tracy. There was a question, Ingrid, I guess, towards you. Did Black women talk about what supports they would like to see to address sexual violence?
Not in this study, but in my other study.
Okay.
Yeah, in this study, most of it was about sexual molestation in the past. The few that one talked about sex trafficking, but they didn't talk about what they would like to see in terms of addressing it. In my other study that I did on IPV, they did. It's just I can't remember everything. It was about the representation of clinicians who are dealing with women who experience IPV, who are typically white, the needing to have more Black women who are counselors to help them, the need to have more Black people who are counselors in the community coming together to create a service. They talked about clinicians, Black clinicians, social workers. There are many of them, and that they need to actually come together and provide services directly in the community around IPV. They talked about education. They talked about even if there are white counselors, they need to do the work in order to understand the ways in which Black women experience IPV generally. They talked about the fact that, the white community needs to understand why there's hesitance, for example, about talking about IPV and getting their men in trouble. And if you don't have that lens and understanding of the Black community, then it's very difficult to help women. They talked about the need to educate Black women about the different types of IPV, financial, emotional abuse, physical abuse, because many Black women and other women don't understand that what they're experiencing is abuse. They talked about having a trauma-informed lens. There are a lot of different things. I just can't remember all of it. But yeah, this was coming from Black women who were providing us with suggestions about what can be done and how they can be seen more around IPV and why IPV is a very unique and specific experience for Black women. that I think a lot of people don't understand. It comes with that is a really unique and specific experience for Black women because of how the Black community is viewed, and because they didn't want to further stigmatize the Black community, and because the Black community is seen as violent, that to call on your Black your Black partner, male partner, or other partner, or female partner was problematic because you're contributing to that stigma.
Yeah.
So it's kind of wrapped around in a lot of different things that makes it very challenging, but to have people who can understand that and have that lens was what people talked about.
Thank you. Wendy, a shout out for the fact that it bang on around education in terms of we need education, which will give birth to employment. And poverty among Black people is one of the key causes of all the current problems. So we know that within the social terms of health, it's all connected. So thank you for advocating and supporting that comment. And I love the fact that the province has been saying they want the research, they want the information in order to start the sisterhood. And now they have the research and on the health of African Nova Scotian women, and now they can't say that anymore. So let's see that action. And don't forget non-state torture, NST. So
Yes.
great.
Can I make
comments.
another comment?
Yes, please.
I want to congratulate Ingrid on the study and collecting the data that she did. I mean, it's qualitative data, but it's important and very compelling, these stories. I mean, to read them, it's really eye-opening. But, you know, we have other data as well. There was some data released, I think, in December that African Nova Scotian women have a 40% lower rate of pap smears and mammograms.
Yeah.
Don't know the reason for this, but whether it has something to do with, you know, needing more providers of African descent, I don't really know. I don't think anybody does, but I think it's another point where a sisterhood, you know, is very important and very needed, and, you know, could lower these rates because, you know, this is clearly putting these women at much higher risk of cervical cancer and breast cancer if it's not detected at an early stage. So, you know, we do have some data. We're meeting with the government and trying to get them to start collecting race-based data. But, you know, this is a good start, and something maybe we can take forward to Nova Scotia Health Authority in case for why we need a sisterhood sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Ron. I know you're one of our biggest cheerleaders and champions in making that happen, because a long time ago, Donna Jones-Darrell did that research as a nurse around cancer, and the fact that because the tissue in women's breasts Black women's breasts is thicker, they don't often detect the cancer unless they do it earlier. So there was a whole encouragement from her study that Black women should get their breasts tested earlier, do mammograms earlier. But yet the general healthcare system was fighting against that because there wasn't enough research to indicate that. So Black women would be getting tested later, and by that time it would be too late in terms of the breast cancer and the acceleration of it. And the same things would happen around pap smear. It goes back to people's lack of trust with the healthcare system, and similar how you've been able to build up amazing trust within the Black men's brotherhood. We need a similar thing for the women. There is a lack of trust within the healthcare system that goes with that. So thank you for those words, and acknowledge the fact that there is data, there is research, and now we need action. So it reinforces it. Other questions or comments? I know it's nice outside, but we don't want to stop this fantastic conversation and great opportunity to learn, because we don't often have a chance to celebrate ourselves and to celebrate Black researchers. And I appreciate the time that you've taken, Ingrid, to share your research and to be here with us, because I know that, you know, time is tight for everyone during this time, and for all of you joining us on Zoom to hear about this research. So I don't want to stop anyone. If there's other comments or questions you may have, we still have time. Because the supper that I have to cook to take to my mother's isn't done yet. No, I'm joking. When the supper's done and I have to go, I'm turning it over to Karen to cover. Oh, I'm going to pass my call on Zoom to Karen, because I have to go deliver supper to my mother. So I'm hoping that one of my sisters or brothers can then take over the moderating, but I do as a colleague and a friend and a sister in the struggle for Black health for Black women, and a member of the Sister Alliance. I just want to say thank you, Ingrid, for myself and me having the opportunity to pop in, moderate, and then pop back out. But that's the reality of Black women as well, right? We're always caring and nurturing, and we spend what time we can in being connected to each other. So I apologize for me having to leave early to check in on my mom, but I appreciate your talk and your research and working with you as a colleague, and thank all of you for coming. So I'm going to turn it over to one of my other sisters to continue with the moderation.
Thanks,
and thank all of you for coming online. We'll be in touch soon, sisters.
Thanks, Barb. So are there any more questions that anybody want to propose to the doctor?
So I have so many questions, but I think I don't want to. I talk a lot, and I just was hoping that maybe I don't know where you live, where you are, Ingrid, or anyone else, but I think we just need to keep this going. I like to talk. I mean, personally, I see a therapist twice a week, and I love it, and I need it, and it works for me because that's a vehicle for me as therapy. I like that, and talking to someone like Ingrid would work 100% better for me because we are of the same skin color, so it's nice. I mean, I love my therapist is amazing, but it's just so refreshing to hear and see so much that we all share. It's nice.
So Ingrid,
I don't have a question, I guess.
That means we have to get this up running soon.
Yes.
There's a need for it.
Well, this is just speaking to how much a need, how much we need this. And she mentioned, somebody who looks like her. That's part of the problem, right?
But I mean, now I have to say, even though I say someone who looks like me, for me it's very important because I think we also need to educate our other brothers and sisters who share the same struggle emotionally, physically, mentally, so that we can share our experiences and so on. So I like to educate and share as well, and I think it's important because then it just goes down to how we educate our children. I think it's the same thing with educating others as well.
As well, Letty, one of the things that has been identified is that a lot of African Nova Scotian women, when seeking counseling, are finding that they have to explain to their counselors through their curious questioning the history of us in Nova Scotia because they don't know it. And therefore, they don't understand that they're adding another layer to our trauma.
But you know what? I honestly, to me personally, I don't think it as it is trauma. I find it more traumatic that my people that look like me don't know their own history and they find it strange. So that scares me more than me having to educate someone who doesn't look like me. That scares me more than, because I think it helps me to say, oh wow, they're interested. Oh wow, I get an opportunity to share again and teach, so that then that's going to get passed on, and then that's going to get passed on. That's my hope and that's my dream, and I believe it does happen. Paying it forward always does somehow. So that's what happens for me. You're muted, by the way.
Who's muted?
So is there any other questions that you would like to propose?
Dr. Ingrid, do you want to go over those questions that you basically had? See what the ladies have to say?
Eddie, thank you for your comments and the information and sharing some of your personal story. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome.
These are the discussion questions. Kind of adding to what I already found, anything that I missed, maybe.
I have a quick question. I don't know if anyone can hear me.
Yes?
Okay, so in your study, you mentioned that the age ranges of the women that you spoke to were early 20s into their 60s, correct?
Yes.
So this service that you're investigating and promoting or putting forward, is it just going to be focusing on women in those age groups, or will there be services that are directed to adolescents and teenagers? And the reason why I ask that is I think of like my own experience growing up. I didn't have anyone that was really an advocate for me when it came to schooling or mental health issues that I was dealing with. So I really struggled in high school. I struggled in undergrad. It was only until I went to medical school where I kind of got the help that I needed, and I was able to do much better. And I always thought that if I had that help earlier, my path wouldn't have been as difficult as it was. So in a lot of cases, like you spoke about how some Black women don't report domestic violence because of self-worth issues and stuff like that. So instead of being more reactive, I think that it would be like obviously better if we can be proactive in instilling these values and giving these services to younger women before they're in their 30s and 40s. So I don't know if that was something that was thought about or no.
In my study, it was 18 and over because once you start looking at children, there are ethical implications, right? In terms of safety of the research and the safety of the participants that I have who are children, for example. So I typically say 18 and over for any study that I'm doing. And that's typically just what I focus on. I focus on women, young women, 18 and over. That doesn't mean that the service, I guess it really depends on what the Brotherhood is doing as well. It doesn't mean the service is not going to look at women who are younger, but they can take from my research what they can. It's still useful, but I decided just for ethical reasons not to go below 18. There is when I talked about the findings, if you remember, I talked about a suggestion made that there should be a mentorship program as part of this service. And that's actually about young women, right? So providing mentorship. I wasn't very explicit because I was trying to go quickly, but it's about providing mentorship to young Black women, adolescents specifically, through this health service. So it was an example of how the person felt that we needed to be reaching beyond just adult women. But it really is about, since much of this is going to be modeled on the Brotherhood, I don't know if the Brotherhood responds to the needs of young Black children, young Black boys, I don't know, but.
Okay. So what's the age? So what would the age limit be then? Would it start from adolescents to is there age limitation or?
For the Brotherhood?
No, for this women's program that you're talking about.
Oh, in terms of Nova Scotia Health Authority, no, I haven't been made aware of any age limit. But with my research, I just chose to recruit people who are 18 and above.
Okay.
But for the actual service, they're going to have to actually decide that. Those are things that I would not be deciding. I guess they would be deciding based on what has happened in the past, I guess.
Okay, so my next question is then, for your research, what was the age group?
The age range?
Yes.
23-ish, 23 to about early 60s.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
With the Brotherhood, we really don't have the capacity to deal with the pediatric age group because it's a specialized group with specialized problems. We've been asked, to see some younger men, maybe 17, 18, in high school, but that's pretty much the lower limit of what we've dealt with very a few small exceptions, but we just don't have the providers and the capacity to do that.
On the other hand, too, I do agree with Dr. Ron, but sometimes too, you know, as a Black organization, sometimes we have to do a little as well. And so we do have like a mentorship component, a part of our program, whereas there would be some principals that would invite us to come into schools and talk. Like for instance, at Auburn High with Miss Hudson, we have Pastor Dewey. Pastor Dewey would go in and talk to various students, you know, on behalf of the Men's Health League. And so this is why it's important for the Men's Health League and the Brotherhood, because with the Men's Health League, we can have individuals from the community to work with us because of us being at capacity.
So it's probably going to be similar for the sisterhood in terms of what you just said. Yeah.
Are there any more questions? Does anyone have?
Marsha, I just have a quick question for me.
I'm both the type.
Initiative, are you guys thinking of concentrating
It's muzzled.
or are you thinking about expanding it?
It's muffled. You can barely hear.
Is it okay? I think it might be this computer. Let me know if you can't hear me. Maybe I can type.
You've got some feedback going on, so something needs to be turned off or turned down.
Give me for 1 second here. Okay. Is that any better?
No, you have something that has to be turned off.
Yeah.
You have like Bluetooth on.
On my work computer, we're between virtual and non-virtual, so maybe I'll type it.
Yes, text it and say who you are, I guess. I'm not sure who we're speaking with.
Well, that's Shalina.
Shalina, she's a social worker.
She used to live here.
Thanks, Shalina. I could barely hear you. I couldn't make out the voice. Is there any other questions to the floor while we're waiting for Shalina to text her question or comment?
So can I ask about the Association of Black Social Workers? Because I think a lot of you guys are members of those. Some of you guys that are up here tonight. So do you, Ingrid, would they be involved in any way, or were they with your research?
No, no, they're not involved in the research, but the Sisterhood Initiative, Sharon Davis Murdoch is on, I don't know what to call, she's pushing for the service to happen, and she is co-president of HOC, and Marsman of the Blackstone, what's her name?
Veronica
Marsman is a co-president of HOP as well, and Veronica Marsman is the head of the Black Social Workers Association. So I don't know if Veronica is going to be involved in this, but Sharon Davis Murdoch is the person who is going to advocate, is going to be the go-between in a way. So I have my research, but then she's going to make sure that our research gets put into practice. And not that I'm not going to advocate as well, but her job is ready to advocate, just like she did with the Brotherhood, to make sure that this happens, to make sure that the research doesn't sit on a shelf. And right. Of course, I want to be part of it as well. So she's kind of on the advisory committee.
So now, just to back up this other question. So how many did you, like, when you got your research situated, did you think about, were you going to interview any professionals and then people who are, I guess, clients or patients or in that category, or was it just across the board? I think you mentioned that in part of it, but there was so much I'm not good at remembering it all.
I simply asked for like Black women struggling with mental health problems. I didn't want to specify that I wanted people who were actually in counseling or those who weren't. I wanted, because a lot of Black women don't see counseling. So it was kind of broad, and I said, are you currently struggling with emotional issues? And I mentioned the age range, that you had to be 18 years of age and older, and you had to consider yourself Black or identify as Black. So I left it wide open. And in terms of socioeconomic status or professional, it was a mix of people.
Okay, I have the question from Shalina. Can I propose it to you?
Yes.
Her question is the initiative focused on HRM? Will it be service be offered provincially through telemedicine?
When I met with Mario and Dr. Mill, they told me that similar to the Brotherhood, it initially has to be HRM. I know that they're looking to expand the Brotherhood beyond the HRM right now. That's why when I met with Gary O'Toole and others about the sisterhood in February, he said yes. He did indicate to me that he's interested in the sisterhood, but I think he said, "Oh, we need to expand the Brotherhood before the HRM, beyond the HRM to Nova Scotia." So I have a feeling like right now with the sisterhood, it's just up and running. They're not going to go big yet.
Okay, so they're going to focus
They're going to do HRM. And my study was HRM for that purpose.
All right, thank you. Hopefully that answered your question, Selena.
Okay, so for some information, I think this is from Ms. Beal. She asks about the ADSW. So for me, my position in the Nova Scotia Brotherhood is the navigator. And so I work in the justice field as well, where I have individuals come into the court and, and various other governmental agencies. And so what I do is when there's a person of African descent, a female, that a service provider has, they would refer that individual to me. And what I would do is refer that individual to Courtney Brown. So Courtney Brown is almost the female version of Mario at the moment, but at the same time, she's doing it on behalf of Association of Black Social Workers, but they don't have the capacity to do it. So it's almost like she's doing it for a favor to me. So that's what's happening. So when it comes to the navigation component, Courtney Brown from the ADSW take cares of that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mario. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to tie this up if there's not any more questions, all right? I'd like to thank you, Dr. Ingrid Waldron, for your presentation. It definitely was, feasible and informative to us ladies and women and other folks here too. Yes, I thought it was really interesting, and I think that it'd be great if we could actually get this program up someday, like in the very near future, but definitely informative and very interesting. So thank you so much for sharing your project.
I have one comment to make. One thing that I think would be important is that, somebody mentioned, how can we be involved? Well, we should probably have an advisory committee for the sisterhood, right? A community of Black women comprised of the group that you just talked about, the Black Nova Scotian Women's Health or Alliance or something that somebody spoke about earlier. But, a lot of research projects and community initiatives have an advisory committee comprised of the people that are the focus of that project. So an advisory committee comprised of Black women in the HRM or in Nova Scotia more broadly, that Sharon Davis Murdoch and other people at Nova Scotia Health Authority can actually refer to for advice would actually be a great thing to have. And, we have the women, we know who the women who would want to do that are in Nova Scotia, because they keep popping up at every event and meeting, those people who are really invested. So in with this group that you are with Barb Hamilton Hinch, she mentioned.
Yes, that's a great.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that down because that would be great to have, like an advisory committee.
So can I ask, would any of you guys be getting in touch with any of us tonight? If there was anything that we could do in the way of support or another group meeting or talk or anything like that, so that we can be of service somehow to help get this group going?
You mean the advisory committee?
Yeah.
I think the best way is, I don't know what Mario thinks, if I should just, maybe we need to ask permission from Gary to, like, I don't want to do anything yet. I don't know if they would think it's appropriate that we have an advisory committee. Do you think we need to ask Sharon and the other individuals whether or not this is a good idea?
So before you say anything, like Lindsay Sutherland, she is the director. She is on here. So she's hearing you guys, and I know she is going to go back. So, you know, that's why I wanted Ingrid to go over her questions so that, you know, you guys can talk. And Lindsay now, it's on her to go back and do her work. I mean, and she does an amazing work. Like she got us, the Brotherhood, up and running. I have a feeling she's gonna push.
Oh, okay. So
I'm not saying I have a feeling.
So I'll just put that out there that I think if Lindsay's listening, that would be great to have an advisory committee comprised of Black women who would be able to provide suggestions and be there for advice around the sisterhood, all elements of it. And if you think that's a good idea, and if you could maybe bring it back to Gary O'Toole and others, that would be really great. And then if they say yes, I guess the best way for that to happen is for everybody to send their names to my email, to one email.
Yeah, I'd actually had privately messaged Mario to say, tomorrow we have a meeting tomorrow about something else. I'm like, let's debrief about this tomorrow and figure out what our next steps are. So definitely, you know, I think the next step would be figuring out what a proposal would look like. And we would have to kind of reach out to our stakeholders. And I think this is an amazing group that we could be tapping into to figure out what that looks like. Again, I don't hold the purse strings, but I'm very interested in, you know, the system's large, and I'm, you know, and primary healthcare is one sort of smaller part of the overall health authority. And I'm already in my head thinking about, you know, what about cross connects with the mental health portfolio within Nova Scotia Health Authority? Like I'm hearing, you know, this is like the focus of this was really like so much around mental health and certainly social determinants of health and all those pieces, which would be the reach out to public health and Gary O'Toole. So there's like different departments and connects I even think within the health authority that we really need to kind of process and think about who needs to be at the table, and certainly the stakeholders from the community about making sure whatever we do is fitting with what the community is saying. And that is a pillar of primary healthcare, is being responsive to the community needs. So I don't want to overpromise and undersell, but I will say that I'll bring these messages back, and that in my mind would be the next step, is the proposal to Department of Health and Wellness. And
Lindsay, please feel free to reach out to me if you need anything. I'm happy to help. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
All right, if you don't have anything else to say, anyone else, I'm going to tie it up and thank you very much for participating, for all those folks who tuned in to this great study.
Great.
No word? All right.
Everybody good?
Well, thank you again.
Word.
Reach out to me, anybody.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Word.